Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast, The Journey to Autonomous SOC, sponsored by Devo. My name is Jennifer Lynn with the SANS Institute, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Christopher Crowley, SANS Senior Instructor, and Michael McGinnis, Senior Solutions Engineer, Devo. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the Zoom's Q&A window at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to our presenters.
Thank you very much for that. Welcome, everybody. My name is Christopher Crowley, and I'll be speaking here at the beginning, and then I'll turn things over to Michael. Today's topic is about the idea of autonomy in the cybersecurity operations capabilities. So I want to lay some groundwork around what that means. And there are not a lot of terms that we use in this space in order to describe things. So I'm going to define some terms initially, explain what they are. Then I'm going to explain what some of our objectives are in terms of striving for autonomy, and my ideas about how you can approach getting there. So one of the things we hear a lot about is SOAR, orchestration, automation, machine learning, artificial intelligence. So just at the beginning here, just give me a little bit of time so that I can lay some groundwork, so I can define some terms that I'm going to be using as I'm advising you on how you should approach gaining autonomy and developing your capabilities. So the first part here is orchestration. And orchestration generally is the notion of coordination between multiple different information systems. And in cybersecurity operations, we tend to focus on sort of the coordination between various systems, software, and data sets. And this might be action on a system, change in configuration on a system, or collection of information from systems. Okay, and that's our notion of orchestration. When we think about automation, automation generally is technology by which a process or procedure is performed without having a human being involved in it. And in cybersecurity operations, for this, it's usually we have a process that we want to have happen, and the automation is the performance of that process. I mean, very similar to the general purpose definition of it. Now, autonomy is a term that maybe we don't use as much in terms of cybersecurity definition, but in order to consider what that is, autonomy is authority to make decisions in the absence of external interference, but still having the right sort of guidance and objectives in place. And this is the generic and general definition around this. And in cybersecurity operations, I feel like orchestration, automation, we have somewhat of a consensus definition of what that is. But for cybersecurity operations, we don't necessarily have this autonomy defined. And so my concept of what this is that in order to achieve autonomy, it would require a thorough understanding of the organization's mission, the systems used to perform that mission, and autonomy would be manifest in the intervention and reconfiguration of systems without constituent notification or consultation. And when I use the term constituent in this context, what I'm usually talking about is the idea of the people who we're supposed to be protecting, the systems that we're supposed to be protecting, the management of those teams, the organizational, structure around all of that. So that, to me, is the notion of that autonomy, and this is what we're striving for. Another thing we hear a lot in this space is, especially just in the world today, as we're looking at things, there's a lot of reference to artificial intelligence, and so general AI, and of course I'm using the Russell Norvig definition for what a general artificial intelligence is that it accomplishes efficiencies in problem solving. It's able to perform work within boundaries and within constraints. It has knowledge representation capability. It has natural language processing, both comprehension and expression capability. artificial intelligence in the general sense is capable of learning based on performance of activity, experimentation, being given defined objectives. It's able to construct tasks for itself in order to be able to learn. It has observation capability, both auditory, visual, or really any sort of tactical or sort of ingestion of data across spectrum, radio frequency, observation, these sorts of things. And then in the general definition of AI, there's the activity performed. And in general AI, this is usually robotics is what they're talking about. And again, for the general AI, it has learning and reasoning and knowledge capability. It's used for all of these things, as well as for planning, both from a strategic and tactical perspective. It's able to leverage probabilities in order to project outcomes. The AI is intended to help with searching and optimization and control systems, and the neural networks in order to provide advanced decision making in the context of extremely complex interactions, and do modeling and projections, and leveraging some of the other AI techniques in order to provide suggestions on specific actions, and then model the impact of those actions back into the model. And finally, and this is something that we consider for AI, is AI provides an entertainment as well. This is something that it's engaging, it keeps our attention, and so on. And we generally call that entertainment. Now, for cybersecurity currently, artificial intelligence, machine learning, we really are talking about narrow AI. And a general purpose AI is able to do lots of things in a broad spectrum of contexts. But in narrow AI, what we're saying is we have a circumstance on a specific case, and our artificial intelligence can be considered to be trustworthy and potentially authoritative in that very narrow context. And so we have a problem, and we're going to use the AI to approach that one problem, and as opposed to saying, well, this thing can handle stuff across a very broad spectrum of everything in every knowledge domain. And so my opinion right now is that there's a lot of misinformation around artificial intelligence, and it's an incredibly powerful capability, and we should leverage it. But unfortunately, there are applications of it where people are buying it with this wholly unreasonable expectation, and then they're disappointed and frustrated with it because they're expecting general AI and they're getting narrow AI, and they don't understand it because they didn't understand it when they bought it. Right? They don't understand the outcomes because they didn't understand what the tool is capable of to start with. Similarly, we have analysts who are expecting things from a product which is said to be built on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on, and the analysts don't have the right expectations. Now, my opinion is that the strong AI, the general AI, is coming. Right, the machines are coming. Be ready for that, and hopefully the machines are nice and they have our best interests in mind, right? But the idea here is that for now, when we're talking about when we're talking about AI and cyber, keep your expectations reasonable, and you won't be let down. Right, and a specific aspect of artificial intelligence is the notion of machine learning. Machine learning is iterative improvement of an algorithm and development of that algorithm in order to be able to do selection within a context where an analyst probably can't do selection well. And so this typically starts with a curated data set with known characteristics, and then the algorithm is developed in order to basically take a concept and say, okay, here's a good situation for us to exert a tremendous amount of resources to develop an algorithm, and then we'll let the algorithm loose on real world circumstances. And that's what machine learning is really good at. And these are things like, protocol anomaly type circumstances. That's a good application of it, where we can say, hey, here's some protocol specific information, learn what's normal and learn what's anomalous, And then we're going to throw a whole bunch of challenges at you, and you tell us what's anomalous and what's normal, and don't make mistakes. And if you get to the point, machine, where you can do that with very high precision, then we'll let you have more work to work on and tell us where there are anomalies. And so as I'm talking through this, the orchestration automation, I'm pretty much going to use them interchangeably. I don't think that there's a lot of importance for us and our purposes in distinguishing between orchestration, automation, and I'm somewhat lazy and imprecise, so I'll use them both. Orchestration, automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, they can be applied to a whole bunch of things that we do in cybersecurity operations. And I think that it's important for us to do that. But I also want you to think about, what do we do? And part of where you'll apply these varying techniques depends on what we do in our SecOps. And so identification is something we do. We identify something that might be bad. Okay, and that's important. Hey, this might be bad. And when we determine that something might be bad, then we do some investigation. And that investigation is a determination if it is in fact bad. Analysis then proceeds when we have a clue that it might be bad, and where our investigation suggests that we continue looking at it in a, hey, this is bad or still might be bad light. We're going to say, okay, well, what happened? How far is this spread? How many different people are affected by this? Who do we need to engage in this? What sort of damage has occurred? How do we prevent more damage from occurring? Right? All of these things are related to our analysis, and this is our work product. And our identification and investigation spins us up into this analytical, state. And part of the analytical state, while we're watching things transpire and while we're investigating things that have transpired, we're simultaneously responding to things that might be bad in order to prevent those bad things from causing more damage to us. And so this loop is ongoing, and there's lots of uncertainty while we're doing it. And as the loop starts to settle down and we have a better confidence in our understanding of what happened, who did it, when it happened, how far it spread, how much damage was a result of it, then we start to move into, okay, we can cycle back into normalcy. Right? And this is our work on an ongoing basis. And orchestration, automation, artificial intelligence, and machine learning has application across all of that. But if you don't have clarity in terms of what we're doing, then it's very hard to select the right application, the right technique to apply to that specific circumstance in order to make things better. Okay, and this is a challenge for us generally, because there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of how we work and what we do and what our organization is like, and the comprehension of the systems inside of the organization, and who's responsible for what and what their preferences are. And it's hard for us to capture all those things. Okay, and this talk, my section of this talk, that is really intended to lay the foundation on the right approach to doing that. So the next thing that I'm going to use as sort of a basis is the functional areas of a cybersecurity operations center, because I think of security operations as centered around the SOC, and maybe this is just sort of a bias of mine that I focus on this, but I want to introduce these concepts because this is how I conceptualize of cybersecurity operations, and it's a convenience for me in order to go back to functional areas to have an expression of the different work that we do. And the steering committee is our interaction with the constituents. In terms of a function from cybersecurity operations, our interaction with our constituents goes through a steering committee of some form. And this might be ad hoc, or it might be formal, or whatever. And by the way, these different functions, you may be listening to this thinking, gee, our incident handling is in some other team. That's not part of our SOC. That's okay. Our overall security operations requires all of these things in some degree. And if you simply don't have it, or you don't do it, well, you're at a deficiency in terms of competing against sophisticated and capable adversaries. In our SOC, we have some sort of a command center. Maybe you don't like the command term. Maybe this is communication center. This is an interface for the SOC, because I don't want people who are doing complicated work having to pick up the phone and answer questions and so on. I want some sort of an interrupt layer kind of sitting around them for that. We have monitoring and detection engineering, all of the technology that's used and all the people that are involved in doing that work are part of our security operations. Concept of threat intelligence and the study of the external parties and techniques which are attempting to cause damage to us. Having an incident handling team who can respond to problems when they arise and at the suggestion that they might be in place to do that sort of investigation, responsive action, deep dive authoritative analysis using forensics, and then a self-assessment function, which is driving for better posture in the information systems and identifying weaknesses and working to improve the organization's capability for response. This is what I call self-assessment. This is also our internal development of exercises and challenges in order to demonstrate confidence in the performance of our security operations, in order to help the organization understand what might be in place and what might go wrong and how we would be ready to respond to that without having to wait until a negative thing occurs in order to get a picture of the posture of our cybersecurity and our cyber readiness, right? That's what our self-assessment is supposed to do. A number of different things in there, but that's what I kind of bundle into that self-assessment. Things like vulnerability scanning and vulnerability management, in addition to exercises and baselines and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so that's the lens that I'm coming from when I'm talking about building autonomy. And if you're thinking about the approach to this, I'm going to give a fairly straightforward picture of a sequence. But first, I'm going to visit my rationale and thinking in terms of how to prioritize your work of good orchestration opportunities and good automation opportunities. So we're going to get into the idea of enumerating tasks, but I want to start with the concept of what are cases where we would use orchestration? How do we prioritize that? For me, the idea of extraction of related and correlated data across a lot of different systems is a sure case of orchestration being a priority. Presenting data to an analyst for assessment, which includes enrichment and correlation and threat intelligence gathering and representation of effectively our institutional knowledge on the value and risk associated with our internal systems and the interruption opportunities that are present associated with a given system. That's data which could be orchestrated and presented to an analyst who's working on making a split second or maybe high priority, fast decision, given a bunch of uncertainty in that analyst's work on circumstances that are affecting the organization right now. Also, a good orchestration use would be guiding the analyst on a domain of or maybe a set of potential options for investigation and response. And these are things that we can say, well, look, here's information for you that could be potentially gathered. These are the options. What would you like to do next? And so this is in support of investigation, right? Collection and analysis of further information. The analyst doesn't need to type all the details in to make the queries if we have an orchestration system basically saying like, I could go gather this sort of information for you. Would you like me to? Right. In addition to that, in terms of the investigation task, there's also the responsive task. The modification and change and intervention in operational systems is something that we have assigned to our systems administrators because they're experts on their systems. And we could work with those experts on the specific IT systems in order to develop actions which are authorized for a cybersecurity team that allows a cybersecurity team to respond in an automated fashion. And this involves the idea of reaching out to other systems from within one console in order to change the configuration of those systems while they're running. And this is work where we can actually cause a lot of damage to ourselves just by having a slight error in a command line implementation somewhere, and we can eliminate at least those mistakes by using orchestration to do that. in thinking about this orchestration, then we have places where I don't want this work done, right? The actual human brain is good for synthesis of information, is good for analysis, and I want that synthesis and analysis by the human being. And I don't want the information system to be tasked with that thinking and ultimate decision making. Another thing that our orchestration automation oftentimes has difficulties with is novel, complex, and unknown scenarios. Similar for artificial intelligence currently in the narrow context, we have specific opportunities to use it, but when it gets off of the edge of that, it usually fails pretty catastrophically. And we see this when we're dealing with like chatbots or phone menus, where they have conceived of a specific thread of a conversation. And if you don't conform to that thread of their conversation, well, then you're stuck in a loop, and it's absolutely worthless to the people who are interacting with it. It's not really an expert system. It's expert in a couple of specific things. And at the boundary of that expertise, it's catastrophic in its failure. Okay, we don't want that to have a system be tasked with performing work out of the scope of its expertise if it has catastrophic failure as a result. Another thing that we need to be really careful about in terms of orchestrating stuff is, while technically the things that we could do might be feasible within the system, we might break the law by configuring the system or allowing the system to do that. And it's real hard for an information system to comprehend the context of legal jurisdiction unless we've expressly indicated those things. So we have to be especially careful around boundaries where a reasonable person would comprehend this, but an information system just doesn't have that sort of conceptualization of boundaries, space, and legal jurisdictions. So automation, we want it. Anytime that we're going to be doing stuff multiple times, we should be automating things. Good examples of this are containment authorization. Now, the authorization, the human says, do this, but the tool then performs the automated task. I collect memory on systems of a certain type in the same way. Do it, system. I have a procedure. The system will do it faster and with better precision than a human analyst will. So long as I have exact definition of when to start, what to do, when to stop, and what the outcome should look like. Otherwise, indicate that there was some sort of an abnormal end. Yeah, that's a mainframe reference, right? So, the idea here is that we can actually program systems to do things well. And the scary thing about automation, and I'll give an example that some people don't like when I pull this example out, but with automation, the more and more that we automate systems, the less are humans who are supposed to be able to save the day when there's a problem, the less that they're able to actually have the expertise and knowledge and experience to be able to pull things back. And in fact, sometimes the systems themselves make it really hard for the experts, the human experts, to regain control. And this is a singular example, but autopilot, which wasn't performing properly and was causing pitch down actions, which is putting the plane into a dive in order to prevent it from stalling, even though it wasn't going to stall, and caused a bunch of injury to people because the thing was going along at normal cruising altitude and it was fine. But the system had a fault, and then the pilots were struggling to get the autopilot to leave well enough alone. That's scary. We don't want automation which can't be turned off. Right? We really don't want that. Imagine a system which was automated, which was going around containing all of the computers in your network because they were perceived to be compromised, and you couldn't get it to stop. And it kept deploying firewall changes and you couldn't get it to stop. That's scary. We want to make sure that we don't end up with a circumstance like that. So in our automation, we want to make sure that we only automate when there are clear parameters of accuracy, success, and what to avoid, that we have good operational processes already defined, that we have continuity techniques for our business and for recovery, that we have these defined and tested so that we can get back to good if we have some sort of an unexpected failure. We don't want to automate things if the technology in use isn't thoroughly tested. And so I suggest that you have an inventory of your repertoire. And this is your SOC or whoever you're part of in terms of doing this. I have a list that I've shared. It's a good start. I mean, it's got 70 or 80 distinct, procedures. Now, they're not defined in terms of the step-by-step. They're defined in terms of what they are. And so I basically have this list for you to download if you want it. And I talk about the specificity, whether the procedure already exists or not, and if it doesn't exist, when we're going to create it, whether it's an automation candidate, and what the priority is for that automation if it is a candidate. And so my suggestion is take this list as a good start, work with your teams in order to reformulate it into the right sort of team structure for yourself. Define the specificity, and this is a really important thing. Specificity, as I'm using this term on this specific spreadsheet, means how exact are the lessons that, are the instructions for the analyst who's following the procedure. Specificity. In some cases, I may say, like, look, I don't know all the details. I'm not going to write them down in the procedure because it doesn't work well for this particular procedure. I'm going to give you some general steps. You figure out how to do it. And if you take and define the specificity for all of the different procedures, it helps us to identify what the priorities are for the work that we'll do in automation and orchestration and machine learning and artificial intelligence. It helps us for that. And so that rationale, and I think that, from my end, this is really the most important takeaway that you can get out of this talk. I mean, you can get that spreadsheet and fine, but if you can comprehend my rationale on prioritization of how to move toward automation and orchestration, potentially some artificial intelligence work, then you really will be on that journey toward autonomy in order to make things work properly. So you identify the processes, and that would involve that spreadsheet and taking that and looking through this and saying, okay, well, we don't do this, or we need to add some things here. And then you define the specificity. And again, even if you don't have the procedure exactly written out, if you have a procedure that you want people to do it exactly the same way every time, then that's exact steps to follow. You don't even have to have it documented yet. You can still define what the specificity is in the idealized state of how you're expecting people to work. And so overall steps and some circumstances where there are exact details, because when I'm guiding analysts and dealing with cybersecurity operations, if I'm dealing with a professional, and I want them to do something exactly a specific way because I've agreed, say as their manager or the sponsor of a security operations, because I've agreed with a customer or constituent that we will do it exactly that way when we encounter those circumstances, I better let my professional analysts know, hey, you might not even think this is the right thing to do right now, but I have an agreement with our constituent that we will do it exactly that way. And that's what they expect. And you better do it because that's the customer expectation. If I've signed us up to something like that, I'm obligated to explain to my analysts that, yeah, I mean, do it mostly how you think is right. But when you get to this step, you got to do it exactly this way. And if you make those sorts of deals and agreements with your constituents, the people who are then doing the work need to know that. And this is a way to capture that sort of circumstance in a terminology that's agreeable. You don't like the way that I label things, relabel it, change it in the spreadsheet. It's got some data constraint in there and you can change the labels and call it whatever you want. But the essence of the meaning should convey. And I hope that that makes sense. And then as you're working through these different processes and procedure, you define what you do, what decision points you have, what might go wrong, what does it look like, why you should start this, when you should stop it. If you can declare that you've finished and it was successful, or if you look at it and say, oh, that looks like a problem, I better call for help. And so as an example where I try to explain to people what I mean by these varying things, I say, well, look, write instructions for me to walk from this room, and usually this isn't a conference, instructions for me to walk from this room to the front door of the hotel. And then I'm going to follow your written instructions exactly. And it usually doesn't work very well. Okay. And the point is that when somebody else follows your instructions, usually you meant a certain thing, or you knew something, or you knew what you meant in that context, but that other person doesn't necessarily take the same meaning out of it. And this is a good way to really refine procedures. Have one person write it and a different person follow it exactly as the procedure is written, and that'll identify flaws in it. And then revise it and do it again, get a third person to test it. And as we work through this, we start to get a larger workflow where we can enumerate the different processes, identify, detailed things. And at a certain point, you can't put all the details in the workflow. Just suppress the details, then have a different workflow. Even if it's too complicated to embed in here as a nested workflow, have other detailed workflows. Now, this is my simplified SOC workflow, and you can download it from the same place, the same link that I put up earlier. And this, by the way, presentation will be available for you to download later, and those links will be in there. Okay, and then we start working toward our automation and our orchestration. For our processes established and the overall workflow enumerated, we start to identify the things which should be automated or orchestrated. And again, I don't really care if it's automated or orchestrated at this point. That distinction isn't really meaningful here. We want to look at circumstances where we can do the work. And if you have that spreadsheet with the prioritization listed of this is a high priority, then you can start to do the work. And what gets a high priority and what gets a low priority? Hold on a second, I'll get there. But I want to think about our movement toward our automation and our machine learning and our artificial intelligence capability. And if we think about the activity as our standard move, add, change actions, that standard move, add, change that we do in IT day in and day out, we can actually think about that as the same move, add, change, but in the context of reactive cybersecurity activity. And this becomes very powerful for us because we can integrate this in meaningful changes in uncertain circumstances. As an example, we do fraud challenges where there's a financial action which is suspect. We seek additional verification. We refuse the transaction, refuse at one time and force the human being to enter it a second time. That's going to effectively interrupt the financial fraud actors because it includes an additional task for them. And if we're uncertain, then we can deploy that as a challenge. In cybersecurity, this is things like an administrator session. In the administrator session, we can switch to an out-of-band verification method in order to make sure that that administrator is actually the administrator. And as soon as there's something that looks like it's a little bit anomalous, you're doing an action that isn't on a digitally signed PowerShell script, which is how we normally do systems administration on that particular server. Well, you now have to do a secondary action via Slack or via Duo or via your Google Authentic or whatever. It doesn't matter. We have some mechanism which can pause sessions and then seek out of band. Now, for our automation, we want to list all the stuff that we do, and we want to get down into into the granular details, much as you possibly can. Start there, but I want to think about my prioritization for my automation, orchestration, and artificial intelligence, and machine learning. So look through that list after you've brainstormed on the one that I gave you and extended it and reorganized it. And then you worked on the specificity levels, anywhere that there's an exact steps to follow. This is something that probably gets moderate or higher prioritization for your automation. And we switch it from moderate to highest if it needs to be done very frequently and there's a minimal tolerance for errors on that. Okay. So as I look through this in my list, things that are general steps, I don't really want to automate that. And that probably ends up lowest or lower. And I also have a none in there. There's no priority. I don't want to automate this. Why do I have none there? Because there's some reason why I want the people doing it, because there's actually something learned by virtue of the person doing the work. And this is really important to note and to capture as you're thinking through the prioritization of things, right? So as an example for our monitoring capability, the validation that our data that's part of use cases that's important for us is still being ingested to whatever system it gets ingested by, that's highest, right? But hunting is none. Why? Because I want people thinking about what to hunt for. Now, the automation is a potential outcome from a hunt, and the data collection, which is part of a hunt, is certainly automatable. But the idea of hunting, the idea of a programmatic approach to hunting, I still want people involved in, hey, this is a good idea. Let's go see if we can make it work. And then after you figure out how to do it a couple of times through hunting in that kind of developmental approach, then you switch it over to automation in order to make things work better. In terms of automation candidates, containment, deploy a host-based firewall, that sort of stuff, we absolutely want that specific granular task as a highest priority. Things like figuring out to send people to some place to deal with a problem, we're not going to automate that. We still want to have a process around it. We want to have a process defined around it, but we're not going to automate that. It doesn't make sense. It's going to be distinct to that particular circumstance, and we're going to deal with that circumstance when it arises, and we're fine with that. So some examples of where we can actually use artificial intelligence, comparative damage assessment from the interruption of an adversary. So this would be speculative modeling, right? Where we might cause damage to ourselves and we would cause interruption to the adversary. And which is worse, letting the adversary proceed or us intervening in our business? And this is an argument that happens all the time within our information systems and with our management and our constituents. So looking at this from a lens of let's actually do a comparative analysis there. Maybe some artificial intelligence in terms of legal constraints, in terms of modeling legal constraints. There's a lot of information related to legal constraints that we might need to put into an AI expert system to guide our analysts on what they should and shouldn't do in certain circumstances, right? Another thing that I think of in terms of artificial intelligence in this context is the idea of chatbot-driven interaction. Now, chatbots usually don't impress me. But at the same time, I typo a lot. I have to type all the time. If I had something where I could kind of say, hey, I want you to do this, and then the system decided what the appropriate syntax of the query would be, I would love this, right? And right now, we don't have that sort of effective capability in place. I think that we're moving there. And I think that the natural language direction of artificial intelligence is going to help our analysts to start to move toward chat as opposed to having to learn the detailed syntax of programming. Another thing that's really interesting, and sorry, this is such a lame movie reference and it's so old, but the idea here is of experimentation and determination of objectives. And so this would be, we could actually have challenges for our analysts to be able to do practical training and basically have the system understand where we had problems and then push analysts into similar circumstances and then see how they do. Similarly, automation of pen testing. This is an area of application for artificial intelligence and machine learning without doubt. And we're starting to see some of the simulation of attacker capability without actually testing the production network where we can do this simulation. And that's another circumstance of artificial intelligence and machine learning as a potential application for us. And when we think about moving toward autonomy, right, we have to make sure that we continue to honor the notion of analysis by an analyst. This is incredibly important. And so we want to have small building blocks that allow us to move toward that autonomy, but we make sure that we develop those building blocks from a larger context of the system of our security operations. So hopefully that's some useful guidance and some food for thought for you. And at this point, I want to introduce Michael McGinnis in order to ask him to talk about what he and Devo are doing to help people to move in that direction.
Thank you so much, Chris. Hey, and by the way, fantastic content. I don't know how I'm going to follow with that, but that was just very good. So thank you everybody for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm Michael McGinnis. I am from Devo. We're a next generation logging platform SIM solution that's based in the cloud. So let's get talking about the journey to fulfilling that autonomous SOC. And I'm going to start here. See if I can scroll to the right. There we go. Oop, went too far. There we go. All right. So I'm going to start here. Main reason I'm starting here is because, first of all, I grew up in the 80s and this ad always resonated with me, but this is a real fitting description of what's happening in today's security operations centers. Security teams they're just fried. They're not able to do their best work. Instead, SOC organizations are continually faced with repetitive manual tasks, understaffing, and honestly alert fatigue. All of which keep them from working on high impact projects that could contribute to the organization's overall security posture. So, if we look at, let me get to this next slide. Don't want to click too much. There we go. Okay. So in this next slide, I just want to talk to you a little bit. So how does that map to the challenges that the SOC leaders are dealing with? I mean, today's SOC leaders are faced with a difficult balancing act. They need to secure complex infrastructures and applications as they shift to the cloud. They got to achieve digital transformation, manage risks, all while attending and retaining the best cybersecurity talent, which all of you are. Also today's SOC leaders are struggling with things like exploding volumes of data, the rapid shift to the cloud and creating, these explosions of data. Organizations are challenged to collect and analyze, complete data from multiple sources, including, data from, cloud sources that are, as well as legacy on-premise infrastructure. And this really leads them to a limited visibility of compromised security. So the need for automation really comes in because security analysts just can't keep up with the continuously expanding threat landscape. It's just constantly growing. This sophistication of adversaries is growing, the capabilities are advancing. The traditional approaches used by legacy SOCs and solutions that are out there is just insufficient. It just really is. You need a much more effective incident response and detection, all of these. So security teams are, under this enormous pressure. So SOC teams are understaffed. Appropriate talent is difficult to hire. Analysts lack the expertise to understand and act on information. Security teams are immersed in pressure to perform with, inadequate tools, legacy solutions, and technologies. And this is all in our 2021 SOC performance report, which will be available for you to download as soon as this is at the end of this conference or at the end of this presentation. Let's see if I can get to the next slide. All right, thinking. There we go. All right. So in an autonomous SOC, so we're going to, it kind of reinvents how security professionals work by performing complete visibility, analytics, and access to the latest community expertise and content. The autonomous SOC leverages advanced capabilities such as automation. So AI teams can focus on critical issues, perform faster, effective incident responses, detection and resolve threats on large scales, cloud, legacy infrastructure. But the autonomous SOC has the following elements. So it's going to have data, which we've got over here. The data is that instant access to data that's pretty much hot. You need that data that's ready to be searched, has to be highly available, has to be highly actionable. Then analytics, AI, real-time analytics, real-time is critical, that helps identify advanced attacks. Accelerating detections is just absolutely critical because it leads to much better investigations and reduces our response time, which is absolutely critical, as we all know. And then this third component of the community. And I'm a true believer in this because, like I said, I've been doing IT. I've been in IT for a long time. Been in security almost 20 years, and the community aspect of this is just absolutely critical because it expands security analysts, knowledge with access to, industry source content, on-demand expertise. Think about that. Strengthening SOC teams, performance, improving the overall organization security posture. We're all in this fight together, and the community aspect is just absolutely critical. So really, you think about it, the autonomous SOC provides SOC leaders with access to the proper tools, platforms, workflows, expertise, enable them to provide an environment that just fosters experience and employees' well-being, all while protecting the business. So it's a win-win for everybody. All right. So let's talk real fast. I know Chris covered this beautifully. I'm just going to kind of rehash on it from our perspective at Devo, but I want to talk about that automation versus autonomous. So just real simply, I mean, automated systems typically run within a well-defined set of parameters. It's as simple as that. It's very restricted in what tasks they can perform. The decisions are made or actions taken by an automated system are based on predefined criteria. One example of an automated system would be a simple thermostat. In the winter, you might set your heat at, I don't know, like 70 degrees. When the heat in your house goes below 70, the furnace turns on. After the house is at the right temperature, it turns off. So the automated system follows a predefined set of rules, which you have previously set. You could change the rules when you want to, adjust the temperature for air conditioning, for example. It can automate with you, if you will. But in the cybersecurity world, one example of an automated system would be, to eliminate redundant tasks such as data enrichment, which increases productivity and reduces investigation time. I mean, think about it. If you're looking up, for example, IP addresses, and if you have that enrichment from, a MaxMinds database, that could be automated for you. That's taking times off when seconds count. And then in an autonomous system, it's an automated system, but it goes much further. It learns as it works, in a sense. It uses AI to make decisions and determines behavior based on the conditions that exist at the time. This type of system is ideal for dynamic environments and such as continually changing attack surfaces that are out there. I'm looking at you, healthcare. That's my past, and that's a very strong case for autonomous systems. Another example of an autonomous system might be something like Roomba vacuum cleaner. When you turn it on in your living room, the system starts to learn the layout of the furniture as it vacuums. It quickly finds the location of chairs, tables, all that fun stuff, and picks up dust while bumping in, without bumping into obstacles. If you move a chair, the Roomba adjusts and remaps the layout without missing a beat. It's an autonomous system, just as you alter the conditions of its working environment. So in a security sense, this could be during a threat investigation. When suspicious activity is detected, the autonomous system learns everything about the attack, which provides the context that the analyst needs to detect, isolate, neutralize, attack quickly and easily. So this next slide, I'm going to talk to you about how this works. I go back there. How this works in the SOC. So let's take a look at how an automated process is going to work. So first, you have a variety of inputs entering the SOC's monitoring environment. High volumes of data from many sources contain evidence of a variety of attack types. This can include stuff like phishing, ransomware attack, malware, beaconing behavior, whatever. So automation is utilized throughout the threat detection process, investigation and remediation, the whole thing. So once an alert is generated, automatic processes are available to eliminate these repetitive tasks. This is going to improve analyst efficiency and reduce the attacker's, dwelling of being in your environment. However, human intervention is going to be needed at many decision points within this process. In the autonomous system, an alert, which could be automated or created by an expert from a security community, for example, detects suspicious activity. Now, the autonomous threat investigation process learns as much as it can about the attack. It asks, honestly, it just asks thousands of questions. Where did the attack originate from? What's the behavior? Where are the attackers? What machines are involved? From there, the system creates a comprehensive story of the attack, which the analyst then can use to quickly identify, locate the attacker, shut them down, remediate the problem. The autonomous system really just shortens the time to resolution by augmenting the work that the analyst does. It performs repetitive tasks, data, intensive work. It could quickly go back in time and ask an infinite number of questions, really. From an efficiency standpoint, the benefits are significant. I mean, think about it. For instance, assume that a security team has the ability to perform 100 manual investigations per day. With an automated system, millions of forensic questions could be asked within that same time period. The autonomous system creates a story for the analyst with actionable data across use cases ranging from threat detection, threat investigation, and threat hunting to ransomware investigations and incident response. It helps security teams, just work smarter, respond faster, while boosting productivity and strengthening security. So the autonomous SOC changes how the SOC organization works. I mean, that's obvious. But SOCs cannot operate in silos any longer. It just can't. As you can see from the dotted analysts in the yesterday's SOC column, security teams are understaffed, and it's really difficult to find talent. Plus, the lack of expertise to analyze and act on the information they obtain, which increases analyst burnout, affects retention. This exposes the companies to additional risks. With unlimited data and complete visibility, analysts have the ability to rapidly ingest all types of data from any infrastructure or an application, giving security teams full visibility across the entire attack surface. Now, as you can see in the autonomous SOC column, SOC leaders can now elevate the roles of their analysts. This is critical because without the risk of eliminating their jobs, smarter automation is going to do that. It doesn't do, we're preventing that from happening. So with smarter automation and AI power analytics, tier 1, tier 2 analysts gain access to new insights, better detection capabilities, attack stories that enhance security. And then let's just couple that with leveraging community content and expertise that just helps SOC teams. We're all in this together. I've said that multiple times, we're trying to lessen that pressure on those T1, T2, tier 1, tier 2 analysts for, giving them real-time access to expert-created security analytics, use case-based applications, enrichments provided security teams up-to-date understanding of what the latest threats or analysts can accelerate investigations. All this means that the SOC analysts are now able to move from a reactive mindset. That's how, when I started out, everything was reactive, to now getting into that true proactive stance, which gives them the ability to confidently defend the entire attack surface. So the autonomous SOC enables also this: security analysts to shift from the role of risk commentators to business risk experts. This enabling security experts to apply their knowledge to protecting and elevating the business itself. The key to providing analysts with unfettered access to greater security, to the greater security community. The community provides access to data scientists, cybersecurity experts, the expertise that they need to perform and transform the research from that reactive firefighting. On Monday morning, guys, you all know what I'm talking about, that putting out fires from the weekend, to a proactive defense. Imagine walking in on a Monday morning and actually sitting down and just getting caught up on email. The combination of deep threat knowledge and advanced data science and machine learning expertise empowers SOCs to preemptively detect and mitigate entire classes of threats, so that when security professionals learn from each other, they become better at what they do. It's human nature. Their increased efficiency and higher success rates make for a happier, more productive team while incrementally improving the autonomous capabilities of the SOC. The best way of putting this at a high level of an analogy, because I'm a big analogy guy, it's like having access to a second brain. And then finally, or not finally, sorry, not finally yet, but at Devo, we're partnering with all of our customers on their journey towards that autonomous SOC. The autonomous SOC enables security teams to move past their, past alerts to uncover the true story. The foundation of the autonomous SOC is a data fabric with the flexibility to scale and adapt to adjust all data sources and formats. The ability to collect global data while meeting compliance is critical and for realizing its full benefits across the largest, most complex organizations. But also the autonomous SOC leverages automation, AI-based analytics to empower analysts to accelerate investigations on a large scale cloud and legacy infrastructures. These next generation analytics seamlessly integrate with security and IT tools to provide better mean time to detection, mean time to resolve, really getting you into that proactive state that we've all been wanting. It's interconnected. This makes the SOC leaders and analysts to apply the latest security, expertise, and content across the threat management lifecycle. And at the end of the day, analysts need to be able to focus on the attacks that matter most to the business. The rest, just noise. Now, finally, quick a little higher there. There we go. All right. Finally, talk to you a little bit about this. If you want to learn more about the autonomous SOC, I'm going to put some resources. This will be available for you to download. But really, this is the journey. And Devo is here, SANS Institute is here, both great organizations. If you have any questions, please reach out to either one of us. We're here. This is part of that community aspect. We want to make you all better. With that, Chris, I'm actually going to hand it back to you, my friend.
Okay, and once I get off mute here, I can do that. All right, we have, I think, time for one question. And so I will ask this of you. When you are thinking about the analysts and the jobs in the SOC, do you feel like the tools and I mean, I think that as a general sort of industry, we're getting better. Do you feel like the jobs are going away? Like, is this when we do this stuff, are they going away? Like, is that what's coming next? Talk a little bit about how this affects like people and their jobs and
absolutely
operations.
Yeah, Chris, thank you so much for that question. I really appreciate that one because when you hear automation, the first thing that pops in your head, oh, they wrote a script that could do my job. No, this is not that. The automation of the SOC, this is actually something that is going to, first of all, increase jobs because it's going to, first of all, lead to more advancement because you're going to be much more efficient at your job. You're preventing security. IT security is arguably one of the most thankless jobs out there. And if you could be more efficient, think about that, what that does for you from a career perspective. Hey, I went from closing, 10 tickets a day to now I'm closing 100 tickets a day. That automation there, that's how you advance. It's not going to eliminate jobs. It's going to add and make jobs much, much better.
Okay. And one other thing, there's a question, I think we have about 30 seconds left. So what's the idea with false positives? How do you override the AI? Like I was talking about, you getting stuck in a situation where you can't get control back. How do people do that in Devo?
So at Devo, there's the ability to reduce risk scoring as through the ticket itself. So let's say something comes in and it's comes as a critical. You could adjust those thresholds as you go through. tuning of a, when it comes to tuning of a solution, these are those types of automated tasks. Like, for example, if, you get somebody that's trying to log in 1,000 times, because they hit their keyboard wrong or something like that. Those types of actions, those are where that automation and risk-based prioritization come into play, so that we can, for example, if it's beaconing behavior, yes, that's a problem. But if it's somebody just logging out of their account and they logged in and they had the caps lock on, it's that middle ground where you have to be able to adjust to the situation itself. There could be human interaction, but as alerts come in, context matters, so that we can lower that risk prioritization, so that alert fatigue goes. So SIMs are one of those solutions that, they always do require, you got to tune them really good in the beginning, but they're a living thing. You have to feed and care it. So there is still going to be some of that human interaction along with the automation that will reduce that alert fatigue for sure, though.
Gotcha. Well, I think that is all the time that we have. If people in the audience have additional questions, feel free to put them in for the last few seconds here, and we'll catch them. And those of you who did sign up, you should get an email with, or a link with the opportunity to download that, the PDF that's on here. That'll be available later today. Usually that's on the SANS website. And with that, Jennifer, do you have any closing things to say to wrap us up?
Just a couple. Thank you both for your great presentation, and to Devo for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.